Amina was a woman of rare kindness and wisdom, known throughout the village for her gentle nature and selfless heart. She had spent her life in harmony with the rhythms of the land, tending to crops, helping elders, and caring for those in need. Her laughter echoed through the village like the song of a bird, bringing comfort to those around her. Despite her many suitors, she had never rushed into marriage. She believed love should be built on trust, understanding, and destiny. The village itself was a place of peace, nestled between rolling hills and vast, golden plains. The people lived simple yet fulfilling lives, bound by deep traditions passed down through generations. The village square bustled with activity, women weaving baskets, men crafting tools, and children playing under the shade of towering baobab trees. At night, the elders gathered by the fire, sharing stories of ancestors and spirits who watched over them. One day a stranger arrived. His name was Kofi. He was tall and strong, yet his eyes held a weariness that only life's hardships could bring. Dressed in humble garments, he spoke little of his past, only saying he had traveled far in search of a peaceful life. The villagers, though wary of outsiders, saw his hardworking nature and quiet respect for their ways. Over time, Kofi proved himself. He worked alongside the men, building homes and toiling in the fields. He treated the elders with reverence and the children with kindness. Amina noticed him too. He was different, reserved yet observant, always listening rather than speaking. There was an air of mystery about him, a sense that he carried burdens he dared not share. But instead of fearing the unknown, Amina found herself drawn to him. She admired his strength, his determination, and the way he seemed to carry the weight of the world yet still found moments to smile. As days turned to weeks, their bond deepened. Kofi would help Amina carry baskets to the market, and she would bring him water during long hours of labor. They spoke of dreams, of family, of the kind of life they hoped to build. Whispers of his past began to circulate. Some said he had fled from something, others claimed he had once been a warrior. But Amina silenced the rumors. To her, Kofi was a man seeking redemption, a soul longing for peace. When he finally asked for her hand, she accepted without hesitation. The village prepared for their union with joy, preparing a grand celebration. But even in the midst of happiness, an unspoken question lingered. Who was Kofi before he arrived? And what had he left behind? As the wedding drums echoed through the village, Amina believed she had found love, unaware that Kofi's past was about to return and put everything she held dear in danger. Amina and Kofi settled into their new life as husband and wife. Their small farm, nestled on the outskirts of the village, became their sanctuary. Every morning, Amina would wake to the soft golden light filtering through their thatched roof, the scent of earth and fresh dew filling the air. She would prepare breakfast while Kofi gathered water from the river, always returning with a smile despite the weight of his unspoken thoughts. Kofi proved himself to be a devoted husband. He worked tirelessly on their land, clearing fields, planting crops, and building a sturdy home for their future. His strength was unmatched, lifting bundles of firewood with ease and moving boulders others couldn't. The villagers admired him, especially the young men who saw him as an example of resilience and skill. Even the elders, though naturally cautious of outsiders, acknowledged his contributions to the community. But there was something about Kofi that remained a mystery. He was kind and warm yet guarded. Whenever conversations turned to the past, he would skillfully redirect them, leaving questions unanswered. Amina noticed the way he would pause when he thought no one was watching, as if listening for something beyond the ordinary. His eyes, deep and knowing, often carried a shadow she couldn't understand. Then strange things began to happen. At first it was subtle, unfamiliar faces appearing in the village, men who did not belong. They would linger near the marketplace, speaking in hushed tones, their gazes flickering toward Kofi whenever he passed. Amina caught sight of one near their home one evening, hiding behind the trees, observing. By the time she called for Kofi, the man had disappeared into the darkness. The elders sensed it too. The village's most respected seer, an old woman known as Mother Amina, watched Kofi with wary eyes. "There is a shadow following that man," she whispered to others. "A past that was never buried." Some villagers began to grow uneasy, whispering among themselves. "What if he brings danger to us?" one murmured. "What if we welcomed a man cursed by spirits?" Amina refused to listen to fear. She trusted Kofi. He had done nothing but love and protect her. Yet she could not ignore the changes in him. At night, he tossed and turned in his sleep, muttering words she couldn't understand. Sometimes he would wake suddenly, breathing heavily, his body tense as if expecting an attack. Other times, he would sit by the fire long after she had gone to bed, staring into the flames with a haunted look. One night, unable to bear the silence any longer, Amina asked him, "Kofi, what is it that haunts you? Who are those men?" Kofi met her gaze, his face unreadable. He took a deep breath as if deciding how much to say. Then instead of answering he simply whispered, "Amina, there are things I have done, things I can never undo. But I promise I will keep you safe." His words only deepened her worry. What had he done? Who were those men? And most importantly, was the danger still coming? The peaceful rhythm of the village was shattered when a young child went missing. His mother's wails echoed through the huts, sending fear rippling through the community. The villagers searched tirelessly, through the fields, by the river, and deep into the woods. But there was no trace of the boy. Whispers spread like wildfire. "This has never happened before," the elders murmured. "Could it be linked to the stranger among us?" Others nodded uneasily, casting suspicious glances toward Kofi. Amina felt a deep unease. Why were they blaming Kofi? He had done nothing but work hard and prove himself. But the doubt had already taken root. Even the village seer, Mother Amina, seemed troubled. Then an old wanderer arrived. He was a man with a hunched back and eyes clouded with age, wrapped in a tattered robe covered in dust from the long road. He carried nothing but a carved walking stick, yet his presence commanded attention. The moment his gaze landed on Kofi, his face twisted in recognition. "You," he rasped, pointing a gnarled finger. "You thought you could escape your fate?" The villagers fell silent. Escape? Fate? What was this man talking about? Kofi's expression remained unreadable, but Amina saw the slight tightening of his jaw, the flicker of fear in his eyes. "You are mistaken, old man," he said, his voice steady but tense. The wanderer's laughter was dry and brittle. "I never forget a face. Not the face of a man who once walked among shadows." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The tension in the air thickened, as if the village itself was holding its breath. Amina turned to Kofi, searching his face for answers. But instead of addressing the man, he grabbed her arm and pulled her away. "Stay away from him," Kofi warned, his grip firm but his voice urgent. "He means trouble." Amina felt her heart pound. Why was he so afraid? Why wouldn't he deny the old man's claims? What had he not told her? That night, long after the village had gone quiet, Kofi disappeared into the forest. Amina woke to the sound of the door creaking shut. She rose, her pulse quickening. Where was he going at this hour? Without hesitation, she wrapped herself in a shawl and followed him, keeping her footsteps light. The forest was thick with shadows, the only light coming from the silver glow of the moon. Amina moved carefully, her breath shallow as she trailed Kofi deeper into the trees. Then she saw him. He stood in a clearing, surrounded by ancient stones covered in markings she did not recognize. A small fire flickered at the center, casting eerie shadows across his face. And then, he began to speak. It was a language she had never heard before, harsh, rhythmic, and filled with power. His voice was different, deeper, carrying a weight that sent shivers down her spine. She watched in stunned silence as he moved his hands over the fire, whispering words that made the flames dance unnaturally. It was not just prayer, it was something else. Something forbidden. Amina's breath caught in her throat. Who had she married? What was he hiding? And most terrifying of all, was he the reason the child had vanished? Amina stood frozen, hidden behind the trees as Kofi's eerie chant filled the night air. This was no ordinary prayer. This was something ancient, something powerful. Her heart pounded in her chest. The man she had married, the humble, kind, and hardworking Kofi, was not who he claimed to be. Determined to uncover the truth, she stepped forward. "Kofi." He spun around, his eyes wide with shock. For a moment he looked like a trapped animal. "Amina, you shouldn't be here." She took a step closer, the firelight casting long shadows around them. "No more secrets. Tell me the truth. Who are you?" Kofi let out a heavy sigh and looked away. For the first time he seemed afraid. "You won't understand." "Then make me understand." Her voice was firm, but inside she was trembling. Kofi was silent for a long moment, then finally he spoke. "I was once a warrior, a leader of men." Amina's breath caught. A warrior? That didn't surprise her. He was strong, skilled, and had an air of quiet authority. But there was more. "My people, they called us the Night Blades. We were protectors, but we were feared as much as we were respected. One night, a terrible betrayal happened within our ranks. Someone murdered our leader and I was blamed." Amina's eyes widened. "But you didn't do it?" Kofi shook his head. "No. But the real traitor made sure I was the one punished. He clenched his fists. They exiled me. Hunted me. If I had stayed, I would have been executed. So I ran. I buried my past and became someone else. He turned to Amina, his voice thick with emotion. I never wanted to bring this danger to you. Amina's heart ached. She could see the pain in his eyes, the burden he had carried alone for so long. But before she could respond, a horn echoed through the night. The sound was deep, guttural, and filled with menace. It sent a chill down Amina's spine. Kofi's body tensed. His eyes darted toward the village. They found me. Suddenly, distant shouts and screams filled the air. The villagers were awake. The warriors had come. Kofi grabbed Amina's hand. We have to go. Now. But Amina hesitated, glancing back toward the village. What about my people? Kofi's face hardened. They won't stop until they have me. If we stay, they will burn the village to the ground. Amina felt her world spinning. She had married a man with a past drenched in blood. And now that past had come for them all. The night sky glowed red as flames consumed the village huts. The air was thick with smoke, and the terrified cries of villagers echoed through the air. The warriors had come. Kofi stood at the center of it all, his fists clenched, his face unreadable. This was the moment he had feared for years. His past had finally caught up to him. The warriors, clad in dark armor and carrying curved blades, moved with precision, their leader stepping forward. He was tall, with deep scars across his face, his voice carrying over the chaos. We know you are here, Kofi. His words were sharp, cutting through the panic. Come forward and face your fate, or we will burn this village to the ground. The village elders gathered, whispering among themselves. Fear flickered in their eyes. Should they protect him or hand him over? One elder turned to Kofi. Is it true? Were you once one of them? Kofi met his gaze, his jaw tight. But I was never their enemy. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some villagers took a step back. Others clutched weapons, torn between fear and loyalty. Amina stepped forward, her voice clear despite the tremble in her chest. Listen to me. Kofi has lived among us. He has worked beside us, laughed with us, protected us. Whatever he was in the past, he is one of us now. The warrior's leader sneered. You are blind, woman. He is a traitor. And if you stand with him, you will share his fate. Amina's heart pounded. She could see it in their eyes. They would not hesitate to kill everyone to get to Kofi. Then the first hut collapsed, the fire roaring higher. There was no more time to talk. Enough, Kofi said, stepping forward. His stance had changed. The man who had once hidden in the shadows now stood tall, his past no longer a secret. You want me? You'll have to fight for me. A hush fell over the warriors. Their leader grinned as if he had been waiting for this moment. Then, with a sharp movement, he raised his sword. The battle for the village had begun. The village square became a battlefield. Shadows flickered in the fire's glow as Kofi stepped forward, his eyes locked onto the leader of his former clan. The tension in the air was thick, the villagers watching with bated breath. No more innocent blood, Kofi declared. This ends now. The scarred leader sneered, gripping his weapon tightly. You have always been a fool, Kofi. Honor cannot be reclaimed with words. Kofi drew his blade, the weight of his past pressing against him. This was not just a fight for survival, it was a fight for his name, his future, and the village that had become his home. The duel begins. With a sharp cry, the two warriors lunged at each other. Blades clashed, sparks flying as steel met steel. Kofi's movements were swift, but his opponent was relentless. Each strike echoed through the village, a battle of skill and strength. Meanwhile, the villagers refused to stand idle. Men grabbed spears and bows, defending their burning homes. Amina took charge, leading the women and children to safety, ensuring none were caught in the crossfire. The enemy warriors swarmed the village, but something unexpected happened. Some of them hesitated. Betrayal in the ranks. Not all of Kofi's former brothers were loyal to their ruthless leader. A few warriors stepped back, gripping their weapons uncertainly. One of them called out, "This is not justice. We were lied to." Another threw down his sword, refusing to fight. The leader roared in rage. Cowards! You swore loyalty to me. But his voice no longer carried the same power. The final strike. Seizing the moment, Kofi dodged a vicious blow and disarmed his enemy with a swift, calculated strike. The leader staggered, his weapon clattering to the ground. Kofi pointed his sword at his fallen opponent. You made me a traitor in your stories, but the truth has always been different. It is you who have betrayed our people. The remaining enemy warriors dropped to their knees, acknowledging Kofi's honor and strength. Defeated and humiliated, the leader could only stare in shock. Victory and redemption. The village warriors cheered as the battle ended. The flames had scarred their home, but their spirit remained unbroken. Amina ran to Kofi's side, relief washing over her. He looked at her, exhaustion in his eyes, but also something else, a sense of belonging. He had not just survived. He had reclaimed his honor. The sun rose over the village, casting golden light upon the smoldering ruins of what had once been a peaceful home. Victory had come at a cost: charred huts, wounded warriors, and families mourning their losses. Yet, despite the scars, the people stood together, bound by the battle they had fought side by side. The price of survival. The village elders gathered in the center, their faces solemn as they surveyed the aftermath. Though Kofi had proven his innocence and fought bravely, whispers still lingered. Could a man with such a past ever truly belong? An elder stepped forward. You have saved us, Kofi. Your courage will not be forgotten. But trust is not rebuilt in a single night. Some villagers nodded in agreement, others looked away in shame. He had fought for them, bled for them, yet some still feared what he once was. Amina's crossroads. Amina stood beside Kofi, her heart heavy. She had known this moment would come. The choice between staying in the only home she had ever known or following the man she loved into the unknown. She met the elder's eyes. I have watched him risk everything for us. If you cannot trust him, then I will go where he is truly free. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Would she truly leave? Blessings and farewells. The oldest elder stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Amina's shoulder. Love is stronger than fear, child. If your heart tells you to go, then go with our blessing. Another elder turned to Kofi. The road ahead is uncertain, but perhaps that is where your destiny lies. May the ancestors guide your steps. The villagers, even those who doubted, came forward one by one, offering food and supplies for their journey. Not everyone trusted Kofi, but they could not deny the debt they owed him. Walking into the unknown. As the morning sun rose higher, Kofi and Amina stood at the edge of the village, hand in hand. Amina took one last look at her home, then turned to Kofi with a soft smile. Wherever we go together. He squeezed her hand, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Then we will build our own home, Amina. One where the past cannot haunt us. With that, they stepped forward, leaving behind the ashes of the past and walking toward the horizon, toward a future they would shape with their own hands. Their story would not end here. It would live on, whispered in the wind, carried by the stars, a legend of love, redemption, and the courage to forge a new destiny. Years had passed since the night of fire and battle, but the story of Kofi and Amina never faded. Around the village fires, elders told the tale to wide-eyed children, the story of the humble man who carried the weight of a warrior's past and the woman who chose love over fear. A tale of courage and love. The villagers, once divided in their trust, now spoke of Kofi with respect, even reverence. Where once there had been whispers of suspicion, now there were songs of bravery. He was no longer just a man who had lived among them, he had become a legend. Amina's name too became part of the tale. She was the woman who saw beyond the shadows of the past, the one who stood by her husband when the world doubted him. Her love had been her greatest weapon, and through it she had rewritten Kofi's fate. The mystery of their fate. No one knew where Kofi and Amina had gone after they left the village. Some claimed they found a distant land where they built a new home. Others believed they traveled far and wide, helping those in need, their bond stronger than any storm. But there were those who swore by another version of the story, that Kofi and Amina had vanished, becoming spirits who watched over travelers and guided the lost. A legacy that endures. One thing, however, remained certain: their story had meaning. It was a tale of redemption, of a man who had faced his past and emerged stronger. A story of love that did not falter, even when tested by fire. Parents told their children, sometimes the past must be faced so that a new future can be born. And so, the legend of Kofi and Amina lived on, whispered by the wind, carried by the stars, forever etched in the heart of the village. For true love and courage never fade. They become the stories that last forever.